Okay, we're proceeding to part 2, and in this part, this is probably my favorite part of this whole webinar, and one of my favorite systems of knowledge that I do not get to talk to you about enough. I really would like to talk some more about this, and maybe much more, and in the future I might actually have a separate piece, a separate webinar perhaps, or a separate workshop in which I will give you more information about this. And this is the system of 20-year periods or 180-year cycles, guys. And this system, I think, is very elegant. It is based on several esoteric, metaphysical, higher dimensional disciplines. It is the feng shui, specifically macro feng shui, as it applies to the world. It is numerology, Eastern numerology. It is Eastern spirituality and philosophy. And I will tell you, it helps us tremendously to predict the future, especially the future between short-term and mid-term, and a little bit of long-term as well. Basically, but short to mid-term, it works very, very nicely. And what I mean by that is the period up to 25 years. That's already longish, going longish, and maybe even longer if you think about it. But 25 years is plenty for me, actually, and I think for most of us, because we're trying to do a practical webinar here. And if you are interested, guys, leave me comments on Patreon and Futurist Trendcast, wherever, and tell me that you're interested, and I will have a separate workshop with you on all this, because the topic is extremely fascinating, and there's so much historic information that I can also tell you about it that, well, your jaw will drop. Today I'll give you several examples of how great this period, my system of periods works, and how much it gives you in terms of predictions. And even if you go retrospectively, you can see why certain things happen. There is a very good explanation. And I want to tell you very briefly, because this is not the webinar for specifically to discuss how all this works, but I want to tell you briefly how the system of periods works and how generally periods, how they work. They are based on primarily three disciplines of feng shui and Eastern numerology: the 5 elements school, the 8 directions, compass directions specifically school, and 9 numbers, that's Eastern or Chinese numerology. It is, and I will tell you that it's very unlike astrology in the sense that hardly anybody in the world knows it. But it is like astrology in its accuracy, and even more accuracy. It delivers even more definitive accuracy than astrology. There is more interpretation in astrology, and a system of 20-year periods, such as if you ever listen to my webinar 4, you would understand what I'm talking about, because that's what that webinar is dedicated to. But this system is even more definitive. It is more time oriented. So it is invaluable in realities. There are 3D reality first and foremost, which is the reality we primarily exist in, and also in 4D reality, where time still works. It works slightly differently, but it still works as time, as a passage of time. When we get to higher 4D, then time starts becoming more and more malleable. But we are very, very far from that. And so right now, the system works like magic, actually. Okay, so what is 5 elements? Very brief crash course. 5 elements is, we are going in the clockwise direction, and that's called productive cycle. That's water, corresponds with the north. Then the next element in the productive cycle is wood, corresponds with east and southeast. Then the next element is fire, corresponds with the south. The next element is earth, and it corresponds with 3 directions. That's the southwest, northeast, and center. And the final element is metal, corresponds with west and northwest. And so we completed the cycle, and then from northwest we go back to the north. That's full cycle, full round. And north, that's water again, right? Okay, so there are 8 directions, and clockwise they are again starting with north, then northeast, east, southeast, south, southwest, west, and northwest, and we're back to north. So we completed a cycle there. And now 9 numbers, of course, 9 single numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In Chinese numerology, we use 9 numbers, and if we have a large number, we reduce it to 1 by adding the numbers in the large numbers, such as 33 equals 6. For example, 82 equals what? 10, and 10 reduces to 1, right? So we are going back to the singular number. So based on all this, that's what we got. We got the 180 years, because 1/8, these numbers are 18, are sacred in Chinese system, in Chinese school of thought. And then, of course, 180, that's reduces by 9, right? Reduces by 9. So we have 9 periods, and each of them lasts for 20 years. And again, with periods such as, with what I told you in part 1, such as the galactic dawn, switching from day to night, or age, switching from Piscean age to Aquarian age, takes quite a bit of time. Here it takes quite a bit of time. It does not happen overnight. So if the new period starts in 2024, and there is a specific date to that, and that would be February 4th. The switch occurs on February 4th of a specific year. But the dawn of the next period, or switch to the next period, culmination of the old and preview of the new period, starts several years ahead of that time. So in 2020, we're already seeing the preview of period 9. In 2021, 2022, and 2023, all this will be accelerating, gaining traction, this shift to the next period. And by the time we get to the next period, period 9, it already would have taken its stronghold. And I want to give you several historic, extremely big examples of how the system of periods worked in the past, so you can understand how relevant it is and how extremely astoundingly accurate it is, how elegant, as a matter of fact, it is, because it actually puts certain events into certain timeline categories. Okay, as I'm reminding you again that we go by several things, and the 5 elements are extremely important here. Remember what I said, north, and equally with directions such as compass direction north means water. Okay, and water has specific characteristics in feng shui, extremely very, very defined specific characteristics. It is responsible for certain things, in addition to being direction north and being element water. Now we are talking about earth, and that's the ruling element of this period, which is period 8. So 8, 2 and 5 correspond with earth. And see, that's the only one. Earth has 3 periods, and that's because feng shui, and generally we're on planet Earth. That's why Earth has dominion. But these are different types of Earth. I define them as Mother Earth, as Mountain Earth, and as Center Earth, or like the inside Earth, we can call it also as well, and that's number 5. Okay, number 8, that's Mountain Earth, and we're in the Mountain Earth period with its own characteristics, with everything that goes in, including like growth of the military, rise of the military, all kinds of like clandestine wars, info wars and all that, riots, truth coming out, spirituality, going within, all that. And as you see that these themes, they will be repeating themselves when I talk about astrology and about Pisces. You will see how certain themes such as going within, finding spirituality, finding higher consciousness, how all this resonates with that. In other words, my system of periods confirms astrology, and astrology confirms system of periods. They're in fact, they kind of work together very, very nicely. So I'm going to go into some examples, and I'm creating a whole big spreadsheet of different periods and how they work. So what I want to do is actually give you several examples out of this. I have gone through several centuries. I've gone as far back as 1600s in identifying which period is which. And I will just give you some examples from different periods. Okay, here is an example of period 5. And I will give you dates of a couple of them so you can orient yourself. And let me just preview it by saying period 5 was a previous period of the Earth. During that period, it was center Earth specifically. So that's really Middle Earth. Okay, incidentally, that would be probably Middle East was probably important at that time. If we really want to go get if we look into the Middle East, we'll probably see I did not look into the Middle East, I'll be honest with you. We'll probably see there was a lot happening at the time, and generally everything's center of everything. That's what's important during period 5. I'm going to digress and show you what happened during period 4 for one moment. Actually, that's also important. And period 4 is small wood. It's one of the 2 wood periods in our system. And period 4, or number 4 for that matter, symbolizes some very interesting things. Not only is small wood, it also is the direction southeast, but that's not what is the most interesting. Number 4 in Chinese numerology has several meanings. One of them is death, actually. And remember this very clearly. And another thing about period 4, that's wealth at the very same time. So investments, wealth, come under the guise of period 4. And now look at these dates and what began during those periods. 1744, that's year 1744 through 1764 was the preceding 2 periods ago. Period 4, and during that time the first industrial revolution began in England. Predominant theme of the industrial revolution was what? Disenfranchising peasants, basically taking away the land from them and disenfranchising them into making them become proletariat. Proletariat doesn't own anything. Plus machines, and machines are metal, and metal in fact not only cuts wood, but steam engines, right? Steam engines came in during the Industrial Revolution, and a lot of metal. Metal symbolizes, incidentally, even though that's west, it symbolizes death as well as all kinds of things metallic, including wealth. So wealth and death kind of go hand in hand, interestingly enough. Of course, Industrial Revolution lasted until 1840, but it began during that period 4. Okay, it's considered that it lasted from 1760 to 1840. And while it began in 1760, arguably, right, it was already the end of period 4. It was the culmination and waning of period 4, and it was the beginning, the actual preview of period 5, the next period. And during that period 5, that's when Industrial Revolution really took hold. And period 5 is center earth, that's digging into the earth, right? Digging into the earth, that's when all these ores, metal ores, all kinds of coal, incidentally, coal mining became like a big thing at that point. That's exactly when it became, so that's going deep within the bowels of the earth. That's what mining is about. So mining became really huge thing. In that period, we're talking 1764 through 1784, and of course after that as well. But look, we're going into period 5 and back to period 4, as a matter of fact. Sorry that because there are so many things happening. So we're jumping to the next period 4, and it was 1924, attention, to 1944, and the things that happened during that period 4, you won't believe it. So it was market speculation and huge run up in the market. Again, remember, period 4, number 4 means southeast and wealth, as well as death. And look what happened. Market speculation leading to 1929, the crash and Great Depression, and hunger, and a lot of people disenfranchised, and a lot of deaths, of course, because of that. At the very same time, Stalin's repressions, guys, and Hitler comes to power during the same period, and World War II starts. And World War II is almost won by Hitler. The period ended in 1944. Remember how I said preview starts earlier? And in my articles on Patreon, I discussed with you how, despite the fact that Hitler took over like a huge chunk, the majority of the most prosperous Russian Western lands, and Ukraine, Belarus, Ukraine, and a chunk of Russia, by the end of 1941, Russians won the first battle. That was already the preview of the next period. And the next period starts in 1944. By 1944, after winning a lot of difficult battles such as Stalingrad and the Battle of Kursk in 42 and 43, period 5 starts in 1944, and at that point Russia is winning. Russia already liberated all of the Soviet Union and advanced into Europe. Period 5 is not the period of Russia because it's center Earth, but it's one of the 3 Earth periods, and the period of Russia is number 8, current period. That's the period of Russia northeast. It is mountain Earth, while center Earth is still an Earth period, so Russia has an advantage during another Earth period, just like USA has advantage during 2 periods, 6 and 7, which are both metal periods. Okay, same with UK and the rest of the West. So in period 5, the moment the Earth period starts, Russia starts seriously winning the war. Russia is at the forefront of liberation, progress, of everything that happens during period 5 is in fact, that's Russia's period, in other words, right? And so from 1944 until 1964, Russia is in the lead, including Russia sends the first Sputnik into space, 1957, and the first man goes to space, 1961. Then the first woman goes into space, and the first walk in space, Valentina Tereshkova, the first woman in space, Yuri Gagarin, the first man in space, and the first walk in space, in open space, is Leonov. That's, I don't remember, I think it was 1963. So it's still during period 5. So Earth period, even though it's not Russia period of Russia, it benefits Russia, right? Benefits the entire Soviet Union, as a matter of fact. Soviet Union develops very dynamically during that period. And that's, we're in period 5. Attention, the period 5 before 1944 through 1964 was 1764 through 1784. Do you guys know what happened during that time? American Revolution, 1775, 1783, Declaration of Independence, 76, and of course the first industrial revolution is in full swing in England around that time. Okay, and now we're proceeding to the astounding events of period 6. Oh yes, I also forgot to mention that period 4 was the period of wood. Russia was losing the war, almost lost the war seemingly. Wood destroys earth in our cycle of elements. Wood destroys earth because the tree grows in the earth, and it's considered that it destroys it as it sucks out all the elements, all the nutrients out of it. So in our cycle of elements, wood destroys earth, and the beginning of the war was, and up until 1944 was ran against Russia, was against Russia. The depression, well, there's no Great Depression in Russia, but that same period was characterized by a lot of suppression, such as Stalin's repressions, such as Golodomor, the great hunger that touched the Russian Povolzhia and Ukraine and Kazakhstan as well, and many other things. But industrialization was also happening during this same exact time. And what is period 4? What is number 4? That's wealth also. Southeast and period 4, that's wealth. And so first industrial revolution began during period 4. That's wealth. Then market speculation in 1920s, it actually started earlier, but especially in 1920s through 1929. And the market ran up, so wealth and greed. And Russian industrialization, Soviet industrialization, which was of course expansion of previous industrialization, or third industrialization, we could call it, in the 30s, that also brought a lot more wealth into the country. Okay, so wealth was very much in the works, as well as a lot of deaths and war, etc., etc. And so period 5, meantime, the Earth period, the center Earth. I already told you what was happening with Russia. Victory over fascism, USSR and USA become superpowers, Cold War, UN, during period 5. See, Earth period, UN was organized during another Earth period. Right now we have also an Earth period, period 8, and there's a lot of talk about UN being obsolete right now, right? Full cycle. First man in space, first woman in space, first spacewalk, because Russia was at an advantage during that time. But look what happened during previous period 5. It was American Revolution, Declaration of Independence, and of course, as I said, Industrial Revolution in England in full swing. It's like digging deep into the earth. Coal mining became a big thing during that time. And now we're proceeding to period 6. And period 6 is quintessential period, generally speaking, of Western Europe, but especially of North America, especially USA and Canada. But USA is such a big country, it's so prominent that whatever happens in the USA, the whole world knows about it, right? A lot of that is also true for England, for the UK, and now also for Europe. And so just to give you an idea, period 6 is the period of the northwest of the world and any continent, or any country for that matter. So what is the quintessential northwest of the world? I posted a map of the world beneath that, and that's the collectively agreed upon map of the world with directions of the world as they are. Okay, and this is why we're not arguing this point, or maybe it's this way or that way. Whatever the map has, that the globe that has been like pulled into a square, that's collectively all billions that live on the planet. Collectively we agreed upon this kind of distribution of directions, geographically speaking. North Pole is that way, South Pole is that way. Poles, what if the poles are shifting? Some might ask, but they're not shifting yet. Or if they are shifting, that's by a couple of degrees. So we are continuing to go by the same directions, because believe me, when those directions don't work anymore, I will be the first one to tell you. And that's not today. Okay, so so period 6, we're returning to this story, is northwest, which is USA, which is UK, by the way, right? But especially USA. So let's go into USA here. And the very first period I looked at, that was period 6, was between 1604 And 1624, and what happened then? Mayflower leaves England on September 6 and arrives to America on November 11, 1620, during that period, okay? To establish the Plymouth colony in Massachusetts. Those who are familiar with American history will know that that was considered a pivotal event in colonizing and creating USA. Pivotal event. It's not USA yet. There were colonists before Mayflower, but for some interesting reason, it is specifically Mayflower that is considered a pivotal event in colonizing the US by the Brits, by the way, initially by the Brits, and then of course others started coming in. So that's the period 6 last time, and then that's 2 times before. Period 6 in 1784 through 1804. That's the beginning of the USA. This the revolution just happened, right? USA begins at that point. American Constitution signed on September 17th. Look at these dates. September 17th, 1787. 777. Lots of sevens here, right? 1787. Look at this. 1784 through 1804. That's the time when USA began developing. Constitution was signed just within that period. That was the ruling country of that period was USA, guys. Before that, there was no USA, so it was a different world, and it was distributed differently. All this energy, right? It has to be collectively agreed directions and energy distribution in the world, and that's what it was. So can you imagine? It's like pretty straightforward. Every period 6 there's something very significant. And now look at 1964 through 1984, which is the period 6 during 20th century that a lot of us still caught. A lot of us were already alive during that period and remember it very clearly. So economic and political dominance of the USA established, including the dominance of the US dollar, while the actual Bretton Woods Accords were signed in 1945, and the actual petrodollar created in 1945. And 1945, as you remember, that was like the World War II just was won by allies. Russia, Soviet Union, USA, UK arguably as well, and these allies dictated to the world what to do basically. But starting in 64 and slightly before that, remember the missile crisis, of Cuban Missile Crisis? That's the end of period 5, still Russian period, or Russia, more or less advantageous period. And then into 64, that's already preview of period 6, missile crisis, right? Same, also very interesting how all these like periods work. And so by 64, it was already clear that USA was winning economic war against the Soviet Union, economic and money war. Yeah, so US dominance established, and the Nixon shock of 1971 within period 6, then unilaterally Nixon canceled the direct international convertibility of the United States dollar to gold. So it decoupled US dollar from gold, and that opened a way to print as much money as possible. And while US dollar was already international currency and global currency at the time, but it was not fully in that yet. Petrodollar was incidentally, as I said, established in 1945 upon the agreement between US and Saudi Arabia. But really, US dollar came into its own and became the number one global currency between 64 and 84. And Nixon basically opened the way for it in 71. Yes, and in addition to that, look at this, period 6, the reigning period of the USA, and what gets established on April 4th, 1975. Microsoft was founded on that date. right? Microsoft, which is pretty much a dominant, Bill Gates, right? And Tim Allen, I believe. Oh, no, not Tim Allen, something like that. His partner that had a falling out with him later. For very good reasons, by the way. So April 4th, that's Aries, the ruling time of Aries. Aries is a go-getter, it's an initiator, is the entrepreneur. So April 4th, 1975, all this during period 6. Amazing, right? And then we're progressing to period 7. And period 7, guys, that's the period of the West. So everything to do with the West, that's Western Europe primarily, and North America, USA and Canada primarily, but also attached to it countries that Japan, South Korea, the developed countries, and New Zealand and Australia, of course. All these are lumped together with the West. So anything to do, even though they're not located in the West, see, but primarily it's Western Europe, UK, of course, as well, in addition to Western Europe, part of Western Europe, as a matter of fact, in North America, Canada, but especially USA. So especially Western Europe, UK, USA, and Canada. All this falls under both period 6 and period 7, because if you look at the map of the world that I'm providing, what do you see? You see that it is actually the northwest of the world, right? So that's period 6. And big metal, that's 6 is big metal. And also Western Europe is the northwest of Eurasia, arguably, especially northern European countries, UK, France, like Denmark over there, Germany, and Austria maybe as well, these Switzerland as well. Okay, so at the same time, it is the West. It is the quintessential West. We designate these countries as the West. So it falls under period 7. In period 7, that's the actual direction of the West. So anything that is the western part of the world, everything that is considered West, whether it's located in the actual West, because all of Europe is the west of Eurasia, right? We designate it collectively. It's embedded in our collective psyche. It's agreed upon by our collective psyche that all this is also west of the world. West of the world means developed countries, industrially developed countries. And also they go by democratic countries. So that's where we are, right? And so look what happens during period 7. Tulip mania. That happened during period 7 between 1636 and 1637. That's one of the previous period 7. Okay, so what is period 7? That is small metal. Small metal is anything to do with computers, with the internet, more or less, but anything to do with computers, anything to do with small parts, small metal parts anywhere, even photography for that matter. But especially it rules the stock market and investments, gold, silver, any precious metals, any other metals, any coinage, any money. Bitcoin was also ruled, incidentally, by West, because it was pretty much discovered in the West, in the US. But at the same time, it is a period 8 thing, Bitcoin and all those other cryptocurrencies, because it is hidden. And period 8 is when everything is hidden. It's mountain earth. It's the treasure found within mountain earth. I will tell you more later. Remember the Desolation of Smaug? That's the Hobbit. That's a sequel or prequel to Lord of the Rings. Smaug is the dragon who is guarding treasure inside a mountain, deep within the mountain, and trying to retrieve that treasure. So anything that is treasure, there's like small coins, like precious coins, all that, that's your period 7. And stock market, investments in stock market, that's all period 7. What also is period 7, that anything associated with the mouth, and that's speaking. Hence MSM, the MSM, just like blossom during that period 7 from 1964 to 2004. That's current period 7. But MSM was born during 1624 through 1644. That was an early period 7. And between 1804 through 1824, even more blossoming of MSM, of literature occurs, because literature also partially falls under period 7 and partially under period 8 as well. Also, first industrial revolution in Europe and US continues, and especially in the US, it's like a boom begins in the US during period 7 as well. And during 1984 through 2004, unprecedented rise of popularity of investments and stock market, computer and internet revolution, the rise of Western MSM, as well as empowerment of the young women. And say, for example, during period 7, for the first time, they started hiring women anchors and women for TV, where they would be speakers. Before that, they were all men. It was highly unusual. It was a true revolution in the MSM at that time. And that's what was happening during period 7. It's unbelievable, right? Like every time there is like huge confirmations of what I'm telling you guys. And you know where I'm going with all this. Into period 8, that's the current period, where the culmination and then subsequent waning and transition of period 8 into period 9. It is right now. And this is why I'm giving you this time frame, 2020 through 2026. So between 2020 and 2023, and into early 2024, we are seeing the culmination, then waning of period 8, when it's slowly and very gradually, very smoothly start transitioning into the reality of period 9. And then we begin period 9 in 2024. But we're already seeing that preview, that unbelievable preview. So just to give you a very brief idea, from between 1824 and 1844, the previous period 8, it was industrial revolution. Industrial revolution, not only in full swing, it was like really progressing, really going all the way, right? And 2004 through 2024, we have a new revolution, and this revolution is internet and SM revolution, social media, and alternative media revolution. Never happened before. So during period 7, it was the rise of the media and liberalization of the media, in the sense that women were allowed to be anchors. And during period 8, we have alternative media and social media, right? And the internet. And we have trade, info, oil and gas wars, rise of the military, hybrid wars, as well as going spiritually within, unearthing these truths, inner truths and cosmic truths. My theory of early earth shift was born during period 8, guys. Period 8, right? Period of the mountain earth. Period of the writer. Incidentally, I've written some books. It did not even occur to me to write books in period 7. In period 7, I was interested in working on Wall Street, guys. Wall Street. Period 7 was what? Was about investments. Right now, it's also the period 8 is also the period of the self-employed people. A lot more self-employment than ever before, when people actually are entrepreneurial. They want to strike on their own. Even if it's a small thing, they want to have their own life. They want to be that which is theirs. The life should be theirs. They build, they create their own life. So this is the time of creator of your own reality. And more of that will be coming in period 9. Guys, okay, so we're wrapping up a lot of karma during this period. So many interesting things, so many wonderful things, in fact, but also very confusing things are happening at the same time. And now I'm proceeding to the culmination of my theory of periods and cycles, and that's period 9. That's the last period of the 180-year cycle, guys. And it's amazing how all this is going, how everything is confirmed. You'll see later through my Earthshift theory, through astrology, how all this is confirmed. And I just want to tell you what was happening during the previous period 9, and your jaw will drop, actually. I told you we're already seeing a preview, right? And preview is what? Is everywhere, as a matter of fact. Guys, look at this. Look at those riots. Look at all this discontent. Look at this, like, Republic of Seattle that was organized, right? Look what happened in previous, that's a preview only. We have not gotten to actual period 9 yet. Previous period 9 was from 1844 to 1864. And now look at what happened during that period. It's like jaw-dropping. I realized this a very long time ago when I first started creating the system of periods. When I saw what was happening during that period 9, I was like, what? And look at this. Unification of Italy. Do you know that there was no Italy before that? It happened in March of 1861. So almost towards the end of period 9, but still period 9. Modern Italy became a nation during the Risorgimento. Risorgimento, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, on March 17th, 1861. Okay, when most of the states of the Italian peninsula and the Kingdom of Two Sicilies were unified under King Victor Emmanuel II of the House of Savoy. There was no Italy before that, guys. Very few people realize how, that Italy is a very recent formation. Now, the next one, uprisings in Europe. So there was unification of Italy, but uprisings in Europe, all over Europe, by the way, to decouple from some countries they belonged with, and they were unhappy with that because there are a lot of empires in Europe at the time. And these empires, those peoples who were under them but considered themselves separate didn't want to be with them. And I'm just going to list this impressive list of uprisings and revolutions where independence was, if not achieved, at least more sovereignty and more autonomy was received as a result of this. And they all happened, these uprisings, they all happened between 1848 and 1849, and this was everywhere at the very same time. So 1844 through 1864. Remember, these are the dates of previous period 9. So we had revolutions and uprisings in Italian states. Okay, that's 48, 49. But then in 1861, they were all united. They were the uprisings in Italian states were against their powers that be. They wanted a different rulership. Prussia and German states, all over Prussia and German states, and incidentally, in the very beginning of next period 1, Germany will become one state, and Germany also was not one state. There were at one point there were hundreds of those mini, tiny, teeny dukedoms, whatnot, that they literally had their own castle, and they declared themselves as a separate country with a few peasants in the few villages around them, and it was a separate country. I'm a prince, I'm like a king or whatever of my own separate country, and they were tiny, puny little pieces. And the unification only happened towards the end of period 9 and beginning of next period 1. And period 1, that's north, guys. North. And where is Germany? That's the north of Europe, right? Okay, but we're on period 9. So Prussia and German states had a lot of uprisings and all kinds of discontent. Polish and Wallachian rebels had uprisings. Same period, 1848 through 1849. Hungarian war for independence. Then anti-Ottoman Empire uprisings, Serb and Slovak uprisings against Hungary, Dutch and Danish uprisings. All of Europe was on fire. What is period 9? That's the period of fire. Is the period of South, is the period of fire. Incidentally, unification of Italy during period 9. Italy, as I said, did not exist before that. Just imagine how huge that is. There are separate cities that were city-states before that. So it was during period 9, period not only of fire, revolution is fire, means fire, period of the South. So Italy unified during period 9, period of the South. What is Italy? That is the south of Europe, guys. Preview of what's to come. Hint, hint. Think about what will be happening in period 9. Something interesting, right? And Germany, while uprisings happened during period 9, Germany actually was unified by Prussia, the North German state of Prussia, during next period 1. Period 1 is the period of the North. North of the German conglomerate of little mini states, Prussia unified the northern country of Germany. See, the ruling period is when everything happens to your benefit. If it's not your ruling period, then everything happens against you. Like, for example, period 9, lots of uprisings against states that were not in the rulership at the time, and they lost territories at that time. Okay. Also in 1848, uprising in India by Sikhs who were trying to establish their own state against England, right? Well, they didn't win, but also in Bali, Indonesia, and Brazil were uprisings in the same period, 1848 through 1849. Unbelievable, right? But look what else is happening. This is really crazy. Marx and Engels worked on communist program between 1847 and 1848 and published Communist Manifesto in 1848. Same 1848. Something was really happening in the skies during 1848, astrologically speaking, because so much revolutionary stuff happened specifically during that time. All that during period 9. Das Kapital, Marx worked on during the same period 9, but published during next period 1. Since he's German, again, North Germany, all that. Okay. And now this to me is the craziest coincidence. Emancipation of serfs in Russia happened peacefully in 1861, and serfs were not like slaves. They owned half of their crop, and they also owned their homes, but they were sort of attached to the land. Okay, so in a way they were under their masters, their counts or baronesses or dukes or princes that owned them, but they were not like slaves. They had their own families. They could get married. Sometimes they needed to seek permission to marry this or that, but usually it was a lot freer, although they were attached to the land that they worked on. In the US, there was slavery, and so the US Civil War happened in 1861 through 1865, and emancipation of slaves happened at that specific time. Very far from peaceful, by the way, with a lot of clashes. So period 9, period of wars, revolutions, fire, and South, right? Who was in the war? South and North, right? Slaves were in the South. North wanted to liberate slaves in the South. And it happened. It actually achieved its goal. And watch this. The war actually ended, and North won not during period 9, but during the next period 1. And period 1 started in 1864. The war was won in 1865. Why? Because North won. Period 1, period of the North. North won in 65, when period 1 already started. But emancipation of slaves from the South occurred during that exact time. And that's what we're up against, guys. And now compare it to today and what you're seeing today, and you will get a pretty good idea where we're heading with everything. This past period 9 should give you a really, really great idea. And this is all for part 2. In the end of this webinar, I will give you predictions, but we are also proceeding in the next part to how astrology predicts certain things. I give you more than 6 years of hints here. I give you hints for the entire period 9, and we will talk more about that at the end of this webinar. And I'll see you in part 3.